Okay, so the question was, oh yeah, and the second series I wanted to start on Udemy was the interview prep, and how. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to tell you that I had an interview with Lyft the other day. Um, you guys know the Lyft company?
Is that the cab company, right? Lyft.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are okay. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so yeah, it was interesting. So I'll show you what he asked. I think it's in my calendar somewhere. Okay, so he asked me this question. Um, he asked me to build this game. Okay, so he started with this is a GIF, and he started with saying that okay, I have this. Um, what's going on in this? Somebody's playing this game. What's going on? So I said, okay, there are four walls, and there is a this cube in the middle. And when you click on the wall, the cube gets attracted to it. And then the way it works, whichever, if I'm doing like a left and right, then whichever x-axis it is, it will move to that on that x-axis toward that wall. And same with the when you do top and bottom. Okay, and then what happened was he asked me, okay, which language do you want to use? Okay, and I said, well, not language in the sense like you have an option. You can use React or pure JavaScript or jQuery or something. So I had to make a decision, which is a critical decision that you need to make when somebody asks you in an interview, right? Um, and I said jQuery, and he said, why did you pick jQuery? So I said, look, I know React, but in this environment, if I try to figure out how the React works, this is a code pen, right? So I have to do it here because he's looking at it. Um, then I don't know if how I might have some difficulty in terms of figuring it out how it works inside here, and I will be wasting a lot of time. So instead, jQuery is much easier, even though I haven't done jQuery in a long time. Okay, so he said, okay, let's get started, and so I build this thing here. This was this is a difficult part to build this because you have to use, and then it has to if you scroll, if you scroll and squeeze a window, it should stay where it is and all that stuff. um, and I was able to do like almost 70%. It's still not working when I do. There's an like it missing maybe like a 10 lines of code. Okay. um, so I focused more on CSS part, and then I started JavaScript, and then the time was up because what happened is that as I started jQuery, um, I had forgotten some of the syntax like CSS. So I tried to figure it out, and what happened, I did this like a right. I was supposed to do like 150. So when I click on this box, it should move. Well, it's supposed to move left, and I could not figure out why the hell the box is not moving because I was supposed to do left. And under pressure, I kind of wasted like literally. And the platform has some issue. I could not see a lot of things, how it's working, because my screen is also small. So if I did this, it was supposed to do, and then you can add an animation, like dot animate, and then you can do like, so then it would be smoothly, and then you can do this for like all 4 walls. Yeah. But yeah, CSS is tough, building it like this. So this kind of stuff people ask nowadays. So yeah, it's quite.
How many times they gave to you?
So we talked 15 minutes.
How much time?
So initially we talked 15 minutes, and then he gave me about half hour. And then last 15 minutes, some questions, yeah. So half hour, you have to build this. Yeah.
So the last...
Yeah.
So in the last few minutes, what he was asking to you, like?
So last few minutes, he was like, okay, what did, so what happened is this. I had, one of the problem with this thing was, first of all, I was using Firefox, which I shouldn't have used. And then when I did like a console log here, I was trying to figure out the position of the box, and it was showing 0. It was supposed to be 500 because it's the middle in the but it was showing 0, and I could not figure out why, because it was showing vertical 500. So I thought it was 0, and I could not figure out. And then he said, no, I'm seeing 500 on my side, and I said I'm seeing 0, and I couldn't move further. So I wasted literally 10 minutes just to figure that out, right? because of the Firefox. So that's a lesson I learned. Never use Firefox. And if you were doing an interview from home, if you have 2 screens, I would literally use 2 screens, because then I can put the console on one screen, and this, because it becomes too small, especially when you do HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in all in one, and then you have a console, right? It becomes very difficult.
In that sense, this is good. JSBin,
yeah,
where you can see everything.
Yeah.
JSBin, you have a console.
Yeah. JSBin, you can see everything. The only problem is just too tight, and you are under pressure. So that's the thing, right? And sometimes you don't see things the way it is. And I had some typo in it, and that would not apply. I had done like this box, and I was like, oh, why is it not, Anyway, it finally, I was able to do it, but he wasn't. He didn't say anything in terms of like, oh, okay, why didn't you finish it or anything? Because he knew that I got the concept, and I did not get any help from him, right? I did everything by myself, but it's just a feeling that he has that I could not debug. Okay, so he had a feeling that I'm not able to debug, which is okay, under the pressure and this, yeah, which is fine anyway. So yeah, I just wanted to share with you guys, something like this when it comes to your interview. And also another mistake I did was I did some calculation in my head. For example, this box. So I started writing the code because I knew some that I need to, but I did the calculation a little bit wrong in my head. And so it was kind of overlapping all over the places, these boxes. And then I did them on a paper, right? And then I figured out, okay, there was something wrong. So that was like the small mistake that I did because of that. And then but I wasted some time there as well, right? So it's all this wasted time that actually accumulates, right? And so so I would suggest that, I would just say first 5 minutes, project like this, don't do anything. Just say, okay, I'm going to plan. Okay, don't code. I'm going to plan. The problem on the phone is if there is no sound, the guy on the other side, he thinks that, oh, I'm just Googling or something, right? Which is bad. So if it's a face-to-face interview, it's a different story. But if it's online, then it becomes very difficult to actually just go off and then just do, yeah. But yeah, every interview learn something, right? So
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
yeah. So
So he gave you a big. It was a big question. You derived this logic, or how it was? Like he started showing you the screens, and you got the screens, and you were trying to develop.
No, he literally showed me this. He said, "Oh, I wanted to build this." He didn't explain exactly what's happening inside. He said, "I want exactly like this." Okay. Now, so the way these companies work these days is that there are a lot of people they would interview regularly, right? Which doesn't cost them any money, and maybe one of them will get it right because that guy is so brilliant, and they would hire him. Okay. Most of them, some people would fail in the beginning, cannot, because CSS is difficult, right? Some people would go halfway, or people like me always there, but run out of time because whatever reason, right? So yeah, but it's a good experience in terms of testing your temperament. So I learned something from this, and I said, okay, you know what? Next time I'm gonna do things a little differently. Okay. All right. So the assignment was, I have this profile. Let me just copy and put it in a nicer, let's say JS Fiddle here. Okay, so I have this profiles, and I want to sort it by the first name, last name, and age, and it has to be done ascending, descending. Okay, so I see Hemant, you have a solution, which is mostly correct. There's a one issue there. So let's look at this, what the problem might be. So I'm going to copy it here. And so basically when you sort, you get two values in the callback function, right? Because think of sorting is, callback function is there to determine how to sort, right? It understands, what is sorting, but it doesn't know which value to compare. So callback function is there to actually give you the parameters that you're comparing with. So it gives you two values, okay? And so what you have to do is, if it's a regular array, then you would simply say, if one is greater than the other, then return this, and which means it's sorting. So this is usually like the first value and a second value, like in that order, right? So if the x is bigger than y, then you're sorting in a descending. Then, or if you do y is bigger than x, then you're doing ascending. Okay. So how would you do that, right? So in this case, you have arrays have elements inside objects, right? So you get, let's say, this first element and the second element to compare. So you have to do, so this is, consider this as an x and this is a y. And then you would say x dot first name. Let's say if you're comparing the first name, and then you say y dot first name, and then you compare if, how do you compare right now? How do you compare? When you say greater, what does it mean? How do you?
The number will come the descending order.
I know, but what is a greater than means? Because these are two strings, right? If it's a number, then I can say greater than or less than.
Yeah.
Right. So what do you think how it should be? Let's try this one thing. So what if I do this? Let's say so let's say I have these two values, right? So I'm just gonna try this. So the one value is John and second is David, right? So I'm just gonna say let x equal to John and let y equal to David, right? Now if I do console log John greater than David, or sorry, this should be xy, right? Y, right? And let's see what it gets. Okay, it says true. John is greater than David. All right. If I do less than, also another feature that of this now CodePen and I hate the auto refresh, because if you're in an interview and it auto refresh, it just gives you a lot of errors, and then especially when the code sharing is happening, is giving a lot of errors as well.
Yeah, you can just turn off in the settings, right?
Yeah, but I think I did not. So, you know, you're kind of in a hurry, and then you just, yeah. There's a setting here, auto refresh. Where is that?
Auto run code is off only.
It is false. Auto save code, yeah. Anyway, so yeah. So what's happening here, guys? Why is it x is less than y? Why is that?
Counting the number of.
It's counting the number of the characters. So let's start with this. What if we just do A and A, right? Let's do this. It's false. Equal to. It's true. Okay. Greater than. Yeah, I don't know. I just hate all this errors. Okay, it's false. Okay, so it is true. Okay. Now the one, what I'll do is I'll change it to B to see what's going on. So it is false. So X is less than B. So it is actually doing the characters. So if I do B and A, it should be opposite, right? Now it should say greater than. Right. So it is comparing. So when it's a string, it does compare but you need to understand this, right? So when I do sorting, it does compare the strings in terms of ascending order and descending order. Which one is it? A, B, so A comes first, then B. So B is greater than A. like that, right? But that's not true for numbers though. Okay, so this would work. So let's say with this solution, let me close this and all right, so so here the first name DJR, right, which is correct, and the only thing is age. So for the second one, you said for the age, last name, okay, the age. What's the problem with age?
Age is a number, so it's easy to compare, right?
It doesn't compare as numbers, remember. That's a problem. Okay. It always compares as a string. In this case, it works because we have such numbers. But let's say if I have something like this, 3, 200, and 33. Okay. Oh, actually, let me do let me see. I'm trying to figure out what number should I use. So usually, because let me give you a good example. So if I have, let's say const nums equal to, let's say 1 to 12, 20, 38, and 50, something like this, right? And if I simply do nums.sort and console dot nums.
I think that's also work because numbers.
Okay, well, what's the problem? Ah, nums. Yeah, I have another issue whenever I do this kind of stuff. Yeah.
See.
Yeah.
1, 2, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah. So what do you do usually when you compare? You should do like convert to number and then compare. Okay. Anyway, let's move on to the second one. Yeah, I just wanted to know that you don't never get entrapped into this, because usually when you sort numbers, it sorts them as strings basically. Okay. What else? Okay. The second problem was that I think you got it. This guy, right?
I'm a little confused, but somehow I achieved it. But still, I'm not, getting a good hold of that.
Oh, okay.
So let's.
So the question was create.
I was not able to do, but I saw your previous video.
Yeah.
So I got some idea in that video.
Oh, okay.
From that video, I got some idea. Then I tried to.
Okay. So the question was, so I have a square here, right? And I need to create 4 elements that would stick on all 4 corners, right?
Yeah, why it is not showing all the codes? Wait a minute. Why it is not showing all the codes?
Maybe when you saved it.
Yeah, just give me a minute. I'm just opening that file and I'll see it. Somehow I'm able to, get that arrange the boxes.
Oh, okay.
I didn't save it. See?
Oh, okay.
So, 1 minute. Let me see. Here, if I have my beans is 77. 3 minutes. Test 1.
Okay, so the solution is very simple. Let's say if I want to have it on the left corner here, right? So how do I do it? I know the top is then 0. If I do top is 0, I'm just going to do one element.
Emil, I'm sending you the link.
Oh, okay. Then,
so that.
Yeah, sure. Oh, you are giving me in the here? Okay. Chat. Okay. Okay, yes.
So maybe the height and width that may not match, but I was trying to position that all the 4 divs inside one div. So that's what. But somehow somehow I came to very close, but still.
Okay, let's look at it. What the problem is. Yeah. So, for example, A is your parent. Okay, which is we need to have it relative. Okay, that's so the parent has to be relative if I want the children to be absolute, right? Now B, you are trying to do top and left 0, right? So if I think let's just play around with, so this is purple, which is this guy, right? So I think if you just do by default, if you just do top by default, it's because it's a left 0, so you don't have to do this.
Oh yeah.
Then C, you do top 0. This is gray, which is here, and left. Okay, so here I always get confused in this left-right thing. It's like it's a headache. So you always try it out. So if I do left 0, what happens? It goes here, right? So this is actually right 0, and then it plays itself.
So when you say left equal to 0, so it will go to the purple.
So right. So think about what right means. Right means 0 pixel on the right side.
0 pixel from the container.
Yeah. So here, basically, it says, okay, with the content and a right side, I have a 0 pixel, right? So it touches the right side in a way. And then it top 0 means that touches the top. So you don't have to have actually pixels here. Okay. For example, green, you don't have to say top 180. You just say bottom 0, right? And then by default it's left, so you don't have to do anything here. Okay. Then for this guy, again, you already know that it's a bottom 0, right? And it's right 0. Right?
No, I didn't understand. Can you repeat that one?
Okay. So by default, every element is placed on the left side. So all I have to do is, if I want the purple, which is this guy B, all I'm saying is top 0, right? So by default left 0, but if I say top 0, then the top of the edge and my element, there is a 0 pixel, so it actually touches the top. Okay. If I say 5, means it's a 5 pixels from the top. Got it? So think of this way. It's almost placing your element, and if you say top 5 means there is a 5 pixel between top of the parent, and a 5 pixel between you and the element, and the top has 5 pixel. So if I say 0, means it's sticking to the top, right? And by default, it's a left 0, every element, right? So it's always gonna, you can say here left 0 for more clarity if you want to, right? And it doesn't really change anything. For the gray one, this one, now you already know you need a right 0, because right side you want 0 pixels, and then you want top 0 pixels, right? Got it? The green one, you need bottom 0, so the bottom and element has a 0 pixel between, right? And then by default it's a left 0, so you don't have to do anything, right? And this one you have bottom 0 and right 0. Got it? Yeah. So even if I change the size of this outer box, so let's do that, right? So instead of 300, if I make 400, I don't have to do anything. You see? They're working fine. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that was that. Okay. So
that file,
say it again.
that file also. Can you save this file as well? JSP?
Yeah. Let me see. How do you save this?
Save the snapshot, but
No, I think.
okay. Anyways, no problem.
You can control S and it will save. Just do control S and take the URL.
Control S.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the URL will be the same, like this one. Whatever the URL, you can
Okay.
try.
Let me send it to you. Let me send it to you, so you guys. So if you can check it, see if it's saved really.
Sure.
Oh, maybe command save. Maybe, I don't know. Oh, command save. It was a command save. Try this one. Any question on this, guys?
Yeah, it's got saved. Thanks.
Okay. Any question on this? This should be simple. This should be simple in terms, but this is very important. Absolute position. Okay. All right. And I'll give you some more homework on this next time, so that we'll use more position and display to make it more and more complex. So you can ultimately build something like the one that they gave you they gave me an example. So you can freely build something without even having any hesitation. Okay. All right. So today we're gonna look at Object Oriented JavaScript. So remember, Sahil, you were having some issue with that object creation. Yeah. So in JavaScript, do you guys know how many ways to create objects?
Yeah, there are like multiple.
Okay, can you tell me which one are there?
Object literals you can create. You can use factory functions. You can use factory method. You can use constructor functions. And one more is object.assign and object.create. If you have something already,
yes,
you wanted to create it from there.
Yeah.
So there are many multiple ways.
Yeah.
Based on the requirement,
Yeah. So object.assign and like spread operator you can use, but they are actually not creating like a new objects from with a different parameter. It's just making a copy, right? So I would not consider object.assign and spread operator to create objects. So the create objects in terms of let's say if I want to have a car and I want to have a different kind of cars every time, right? So I need to create some sort of a template for that, and then I can provide some parameters to create different kind of car from that template, right? So by object literal, what I mean is, let's say if I have a constant, let's say if I say car equal to let's say model, or let's just use color, right? And if I say red, then this is a red car. I cannot really change anything, right? Yes, I can do this. I can say car dot color equal to blue, right? Because it's only one parameter. But if there are 10 parameters, first of all, I can do like spread operator, and so it creates a new object, and then I can change its value and all of that, right? So I can say, let's say new car equal to, I can spread this car, and then I can change a new car's color to be blue, right? And this would work, but it's a lot of work. I need a simple way of doing it, right? So for that, there are actually technically main three ways to do it. One way is simply using a factory function. So factory is, let's call it a factory, because last time we used the arrow function, right? So let's just use the arrow function from now on. Here I can provide some color, right? And what I will do is factory, if you look at the concept of factory, what factory does, factory has some sort of a chain where it actually like it creates new objects every time from this thing, right? So here I can say, let's say const new car equal to, and I can set, let's say I can simply do this, and then color is color, right? And I can return it. Okay, now I can actually use different things here as well, right? So every time I change the color, I can get a new car. And it's basically creating a car and then returning it, right? I can even do this, null, and then new car dot color equal to color, right? Something like that also, it works. And then, so all I have to do is factory red, and I should say factory car factory.
Can we do that in one line? For example, const car factory equal to taking color, then arrow, then
Yeah, you can do one in one line. I just wanted to show you how it works so that, you know. Yeah. Otherwise, you would simply do this, right? You would simply, you can simply do one line as well. But to understand, So if I do console log, because in arrow function you don't have to do return. It just, whatever that thing it returns. So now if it's a one line at least. So if I inspect this, okay, so I have a color red, right? And I can change it to blue, and it becomes a blue. And every time it's a new object, right? Because here I'm creating the object and returning it, so it always creates a new object, right? So why is it? What's the advantage of this thing? What's the advantage of factory?
Based on the color, you are getting a object. You want a red car, you want a blue car.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And then this is almost like a, in a way, constructor. Let's look at the other one with the constructor.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
is factory like immutable?
Immutable? No, you can mutate it. You mean the factory itself or the object that it creates?
No, the factory itself.
Our factory is a function, right?
Right.
So you were saying that can I change the function dynamically? Is that what you're asking?
No, the factory pattern, like, is it like mostly for immutable functions, right? Or is it like for even can mutate it internally inside the functions?
It's I couldn't hear what it's what function?
The factory pattern is basically like immutable, right?
I did not get you in terms of immutable. Immutable means the meaning of immutable is you cannot change its value, right?
Right.
You have to replace it. So here you are saying, can I change the behavior of the factory itself? Can I change the behavior of the factory, or can I just simply replace it? Replaces is fine. You can always create a new. You can say, let's say second line, I can simply do something else, right? Because if I say equal sign, which means I'm just replacing it, so I'm not mutating it, right? So our function mutable. So if a function is mutable, then the factory is mutable. So our function mutable. Can I change the function?
No, you cannot change the function.
Yeah.
I mean, you can change it manually, but right now it's just getting a color, right?
So the functions, think of this way. Functions are actually, it's very complex because in JavaScript, functions are objects. Okay. So for example, let me give you another example. Let's create another one so we can compare this. So let's say if I have a function const equal to, it's an arrow function, right? Can I do this? Func dot a equal to hi. Can I do this? Yeah, I can do that because it's an object, right? So if I do console log, well, this would be func. That's my another weakness. I'm very bad at tracking all the. So in an interview, I have a lot of time. If it's like I have to run something, it's always difficult. Okay, I have to do dir. You see this a equal to hi inside. So I muted a function technically, but not its behavior. I haven't used equal sign again, right? Because I didn't say function equal to. I muted the function, the object func. We'll look at this later on. In the classes, we have static methods, right? And static properties.
Right.
So the classes of static properties are nothing but this kind of properties that only if I create this as a constructor function, it won't be part of the new object, right?
Right.
But we'll look at it, right? This pattern, because this is important to know, because functions are technically like any other object literal as well. You can actually add properties and it will show up. And if I do function.a here, it will return me hi. Why is it giving so many errors? Okay. And it gives me hi here, right? So actually you could mutate it this way, but yeah, it's a tricky question though, yeah. But I think behavior, I'm not sure. Yeah, but let's look at a constructor now, which is a second way of creating objects. Okay, so I would do const, and always when you use a constructor, it's a capital. Okay, equal to, and always use regular function, not an arrow function. Why? Because it doesn't have its own this. So when I use a function constructor, I have to use regular function, not an arrow function. Okay. And inside, obviously, this is behaved like a constructor basically. So I would have a color as an argument, and I would have a property called color. So I would say this dot color equal to color, right? And here, because it's a constructor, I have to use a new keyword. So I can say const new or red car equal to new car, and I would just pass red. Okay, and if I look at the red car, I would see this. Okay. So in the factory, you have a function that produces new object by creating a new object and returning it. Here, it's a constructor. So it's called, this is called function constructor. Okay. First of all, it's not an arrow function. It's a regular function, and inside, if you use this dot color equal to color, it would basically, for when I use new, it sets this whatever color and it's red car is a new object. I can create blue car and it will be a new object as well, right? So Sahil, remember, again, you are using class, but it's the same thing, right? Second one is the third option is using classes. So let's look at the class. And then we're going to go into detail in the class, but let's say if I have a const car class car. So what do syntax is a little different, right? It's like if you, well, you can actually, you just need to do this, but you can actually have const car equal, you can do that as well if I want to, but usually you would do car class car, and inside you would have a constructor, right? So this would help you set up the initial value. So here you would say this dot color equal to color, right? And then you will pass this color here. And then here also I have to use new. So I would say const red car equal to new car and red. So Sahil, remember you do not have this const first of all. I mean constructor inside. So that's why you cannot create a new, right? Because you have to have a constructor, or you can have some sort of method, right? So by default, you don't.
Yeah, it was interface. So
Yeah, it was interface. So by default, I don't really have to have a constructor. But if I have some sort of method that sets the, so I can also have like some method called let's say set color, and which will basically say this dot color equal to color. It also has an argument called color, right? Now I don't, then in that case I don't really need to have this, or depends, your choice, right? So you create a car, and then you can say red car dot set color and red, right? Something like this. Okay. Okay. So, any question here? So you have three methods. First is a factory. First is a factory method where we. So here, if I want to shorten form, what I would do, I don't really need to have a new car like this. I would simply say. I would simply do. Hold on, let me see.
Color equal to.
Yeah. Color equal to color. Yeah, you can do this way as well.
Now it's like in JSON format you need to give, right?
What is that?
Color or equal? I forgot the sentence.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, it's this. Sorry. Yeah, it's actually an object. Yeah.
I think one more thing you need to add here. I guess around that.
Let me see if it works. Hold on. Let me see.
Because you need to add the bracket because this is the object, so you have to close it with like that. When you create that color greater than this R operator, after that you have to put one bracket.
Okay, let me do one thing. New car equal to this and console log. Okay, so what were you saying here?
Yeah. So you have to put the bracket.
Another brackets?
Opening and closing bracket.
Yeah.
Another bracket.
Yeah.
Not the braces. The other bracket. What do you call that?
Oh, the parenthesis?
Yeah, parenthesis. Sorry, parenthesis. Yeah, because I had that problem. So parenthesis got worked. Otherwise, it was not working for me. See, it is working now or not? I had that problem.
Yeah. I mean, I would not. I mean, usually what I would do, I would not.
Yeah, now it's coming. See?
Yeah, it's coming. But I would, this is too confusing for this. Yeah. So.
I was using one of the projects, so it was like horrible for me to figure it out.
Yeah, you know what the problem is here is that if I simply use this, right, it doesn't know if this is a regular parenthesis or it's an object. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I put a parenthesis around it, right, then it converts this into this color is into an object. That's a trick.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, but yeah, it's yeah.
It's a little confusing, but yeah.
Yeah. You can also do this. Okay, let me try another way. You can say, remember object.assign? You can do I don't know if it's gonna work or not, but let's try.
I think it will work.
Yeah, it works. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's a nice. I mean, I prefer this syntax more because then I can see what's going on.
That's a good,
Right here, I created a new object. Then I set the I added this new object to here, so it's much cleaner. Okay. Any questions so far?
Like you were saying, what is the advantage of this over that?
Say it again.
You were asking the question like, what is the advantage of doing this over the other way?
Oh, the advantage is a visual part, right? Because the other one is confusing because you have to put the parentheses around it, and but if you cannot read your own code after, right? If you right now it's something works, but you can't understand what's going on. Because okay, what happens is when you have an arrow function. So the fundamentals of arrow function is that I can, and let me just comment this stuff, right? So if I have a const, let's say arrow equal to something like this, right? Now, if I have a here and a and b, right? Let's say this is add function. Then I can say return a plus b, right? But I don't need to use a return function. If it's a one line, then a lot of people, what they do is in arrow function, all you have to do is simply a plus b, which means this automatically means it's returning this number, right? So if you get used to this syntax, then you can clearly read this. But but it's quite confusing if you're looking at the first time. The problem with so here is returning a number, right? But if it's returning an object, let's say something like this, right? Then it would create a problem for me because by default, you can actually put parentheses around your answer. For example, if I do this, instead of, I can do this as well, or I can just do a plus b, right? So it's confused that the parentheses I put around, is it a part of the statement, or I'm returning an object. So that's why if it's an object, you have to do something like this, and then if you pass a parenthesis around it, then it looks like an object, right? But then it's confusing because when I read it, I don't understand what's going on, right? So that's why you don't. That's why this object.assign is much simpler, because you can clearly see object assign is nothing but, you take an empty object and then you copy this newly created object into here, so you can see that it will return something, some object, right? Yeah. Similarly here, constructor is simple. Nowadays, a lot of people, in old days, people used to use constructors, but nowadays people uses classes, so you don't have to worry too much about these constructors. So I would suggest focus on these two, a factory function and a class. When you use a functional programming, they use factory functions, like when you use mixins and things like that. So you take an object, modify it, and then you create something else. Okay. More functional way where you use factory. More object oriented, use constructor. Okay. And we're gonna look at also the advantage and disadvantage of either once we learn more about it. Now, what about the methods? So you create a constructor, right? How do you create methods to it? So if I put method directly inside here, let's say if I have a get car method, this dot, well, it should be this get color, right? It works, but inheritance wise it would have problem, because we create objects so that well, you create constructors so that you can extend this constructor. In this case, this get method, this get color won't get extended. So instead of putting it here, you would put it in where? Anybody knows this?
I didn't understand.
I didn't understand.
Okay, so I have this car object, right? A car constructor, right? Now,
Yeah.
if I wanna extend this car, and I want to create a Toyota, let's try doing it in the class here. So here, what I would do is class, let's say, instead of Toyota, yeah, let's call it Toyota. Extends car, right? I can do that, right?
Yeah.
And then I have to have super here. And then if I have a method here, you have a set color method, right?
Yeah.
I can also have a set color method here. So automatically Toyota has a set color method.
Yeah.
Right?
If you want to add more functionality to Toyota, you're asking that question.
Exactly, right? So how can I do it here?
Like for the Toyota car?
Yeah, if I want to
Or for
extend this car.
Like car dot, I mean.
Okay, so it's, yeah, prototype. You have to use a prototype. So you would say car dot prototype dot get color equal to also a function, and then you would say, return this dot color, right? Actually, there is not much difference between this and this, technically. So if I look at the car, let's console log the car. Console dir car. here. Okay. All right, so I have a car and I have a prototype, and there is a get color method here. And we'll look at what prototype is, but as you can see that there is a get color method here. The same thing is actually happening here. If I simply do console dir and car. Okay. And look at this one. Oh. Unexpected token. Well, let's not extend it. And you will also see prototype, and it would also have a set color. So they both are doing the same thing in a way. But I would suggest, I mean, this is good to know, but I would suggest using classes from now on, because you probably not gonna have to build this kind of from now on using like a function constructors. But it's good to know because this shows you how the inheritance really works underneath. They introduce classes, but underneath is doing the same thing. So that's what I'm trying to say. Okay. So you have a constructor, and then you have a method, and here you simply have car class, and then you have a method here, right? And you can also, obviously, you have to have a constructor, right? Right, and here you would just say this dot color. Okay.
I can have both.
This one?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you can have both. So
same functionality.
Well, the first one is okay. So the reason the both is, let's say I create an object, red car, right?
Okay.
Okay. When I do that, it actually uses a constructor, right? So constructor is always used when you create a new keyword and it runs. After this, if I want to set the color to, let's say, blue, I have to use a set color, right? So you can change.
For the same object, yeah.
Yeah, so you can change the color using the set color method. Yeah, so the constructor runs only one time initially, and then methods you can run anytime you like. Okay. So that's the main difference. Yeah, so now the car is blue. Okay, because I changed the color. All right, so we looked at the three things today, but we will look at the more and more information about how the to do this. But I would suggest that focus. It's good to understand. There might be somebody who could ask you this interview questions on prototype. I cannot guarantee that nobody would do it. So it's good to know. However, it's not gonna be. You're not gonna be using it. Okay. Yeah.
But you will be explaining us, right? Whenever when we are using classes, how does that work inside?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, so we can stop in terms of JavaScript here, and then because it's a complex subject, so I want to take it one step at a time. And then next class, I'll explain more in detail how the how the classes works, and also here how to add more, how to extend constructor, which is quite complex. But it's a one example which I can show you, and you will understand how it works. Okay. But the classes are pretty simple, as you can see, right? And we'll see how to extend the classes and the static methods and all that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So then let's do one thing. Since we have a half hour, we should do some CSS as well. I'm trying to think, what should we do? Have we looked at the, okay, let's look at Z index. We haven't looked at Z index, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look at Z index. So do you guys know what Z index is? Any idea?
We use z-index to show like something over it, like on top. Like if I want to show one image over one image, then I can do it with using z-index.
Okay. So it's, yeah, that is a, let's say if I just go to CodePen, because that's much better to show to Z index. I'm gonna go to new pen, and okay. So the problem with, remember we looked at the position absolute, right? And with the position absolute, as you can see, you can put elements wherever you want, right? In a way. So it can actually go on top of each other. So for example, let's look at a parent, right? And inside I can have two divs, class A and then class B, right? Now what I'll do here is make the parent obviously relative if I want the A and B to be absolute, right? So I would say parent is position relative, right? And for both A and B, I would make position absolute, right? Now, as soon as I did that, you can see they're both like kind of sticking on each other. Let's add some border or background color, right?
Yeah.
So we can see, well, let's give it a different background color, but I want to give it a size. So let's say
Size is background color.
Yeah. So I would give them like a 30 pixel by 30 pixel. Okay, and I would give them separate background color. So for A, let's give background color to be, let's say, red, and for B, blue. Right now,
Can
but
you change the size also if possible? Can you add the size, 2 different sizes?
yeah, so I need to have a 2 different size so I can see what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Right. So let's just change the width on one of them. So if I do, let's say width is 50 pixel. Okay. Again, now let's look at the rules first of all. If I have 2 elements such like this, these are called, remember we looked at the position static, which does what?
Default.
It's a default, right? And in that case, they would put the A and B side by side or top of each other, depends on what is the display position is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it would never be overlapping on each other. Think of if you have a classroom and if you say, okay, all the kids, as they come in, they sit. So they're not gonna sit on top of each other. They will just sit. One would sit and then the second guy would sit next to it, or, you know, if you want them in the row or column, right? Now, the problem with the position absolute is now I'm saying, look, I'm creating a completely different floor for you, right? So you have a class here that I arranged according to who came first. Now I'm creating a completely new floor and I can put that guy in the front. So now if I look from the top, that guy is always, the one at the top is always showing first. So let's create another element called S. Okay. And S, this is a static. Okay. And S, I would call it width equal to, let's say, 100 pixel, and height equal to 100 pixel. And I would also give it a color. Let's say background color is yellow. Okay. Now for both of these, I'm going to put them top 0. So A and B now sticking to the top and left. Remember, I always said if you don't provide anything, it's always left 0 for absolute, right? So if I say top 0 and if I implicitly say left 0, then they're both sticking at the top. And yellow is always, think of yellow as the normal guy. And then red and blue are different floor on the top of each other, right? So the element that are position absolute, relative, fixed, they are kind of non-linear, right? So they are called positioned elements. Think of them as they are called positioned elements. Okay, which means I am positioning them and they're not automatically positioned, right? I'm forcing it to, that's why I'm using a left right. So wherever you use like left, right, top, bottom, they are called positioned elements. And those positioned elements, the way if they are overlapping, in this case A and B are overlapping, then the one who is on the top of it, which is the last, is visible, right? So let's say for A, I'm going to make different height. Height, let's say height is, let's say 50 pixel for this guy. Okay, so now the one is square rectangle, which is vertical, and the one is horizontal. So now you can see the red is behind the blue, but the yellow is always going to be at the bottom because it's a static element. It's not a position element, right? Okay. Now what's going to happen is that what if I want A to be on the top of B?
A to be index, Z index.
Yeah, then you use Z index. So by default, both of these A and B, the Z index, are sort of like 0, right? So all I have to do is change the Z index of A to be 1. Now what happened? It comes up because B is 0 by default. Okay.
Yeah.
This is very important to understand because oftentimes when you write some element and that's not showing up, it's because of this. So always the 3 rules is, if the element is non-position, which is static, then it's always going to be at the bottom. There are cases where it can come back to top, but by default it's always going to be at the bottom. Then all the position element, they would, if they don't have Z indexes, then they would, whichever order they are coming. So A was first and then B is later. So the B is visible, right?
Yeah.
Now if I want A to be visible, then I would change the Z index.
Yeah. Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, so I have an interesting example. Let me do this to make it more visibly clear because it's quite hard to understand.
So this Z index will be only applicable when we do absolute positioning, or is it
absolute, relative? So remember I said the first thing is you need to know it only applies to position that are positioned elements, which is absolute, relative, fixed, okay, and then there's another one called sticky, which we haven't looked, but it applies to all the 4, where it's kind of non-linearly applied, right? So
not for the yellow one? I mean the parent?
No, it's within the parent. Think of parent, don't worry about the parent. Within the parent.
Sorry. I mean, yes, the static one.
Yeah, so within the parent, I have S is a static, and then AB is absolute, right? So initially what happened, let me just show you. So it will create a floor. This is a normal floor where we're gonna call this static floor. Think of this way. Okay. Now we're gonna place this element here. Now this is our element S. Okay. Now let's say you create another floor. Let's just copy paste this. I'm going to create absolute floor, right? Now here I have two elements, A, which came first, right? Then came B, right? So if I look at from top, what do I see? I would see B only. And then underneath I would see A, and underneath I would see S, right? Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I wanna move A to be on the top. So this one I would say absolute floor. I wouldn't call absolute. I would say positioned. And I would call floor 0, right? This means that by default, it will create two floors. One is static and one is position 0. And position 0 has its two elements, right? Now, if I want A to be up front, I would have to create another floor. So I would create another floor called positioned 1, where 1 is a Z index. I'm just gonna, well, let's call it position Z1, and this color, call it Z0. Okay, and when I do Z1, actually I'm moving A to Z1, right? So A won't live here anymore, and A would come here. So now what do you see? A on the top. Okay. Right? Okay, now interesting question. What if I want to make S to be on the top and A and B at the bottom? How do I do that? Any idea?
Yes, on the top. That's what I was asking. Like the index will work for static also?
It won't work, but is there any way to do it, make it top? It won't work on S. Okay?
Oh, Z index won't.
But you have to change the Z index of A and B to place them at the bottom.
Okay, negative, like negative value.
Yep, -1. So if I change this to both of them to -1. So let's do that. So I'm just gonna do -1. As soon as I did -1, it disappeared from here, right? Because it's behind, it goes behind. And I can do the same thing for this guy. Now it disappeared, right?
Yeah.
So what really happened is actually it created another floor here underneath the static. And again, in this case, B would be still higher than A, right? Because B came later. Got it? So it will be S, B, and A. If I want to examine this, let's change A and B to, let's say, 200 pixels. And I'm gonna make this 200 pixels. And then height, I would do 110 or something. Okay, so now I have S first, then B, which is blue, and then A, right? Which is showing up here. And this is very important. So another rule about Z index is it's always integer. So you cannot put like 1.2 or something. Otherwise, it will completely ignore it. Okay. It can be negative, but it can be 0, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or -1, -2, -3. Okay, but it's always has to be full number. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, everybody got this. This is very important to understand. Bhuvaneshwari, did you get?
I got an idea, but I have to look into it to further understand it.
Okay, I'll give you some homework,
So,
and then you can watch the video. Okay. If you want to master CSS, if you consider three concepts: position, display, and z-index. If you master these three, you can pretty much do anything, right?
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately what it is, right? You can place something somewhere. You can maneuver it so that one is top of each other. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would suggest draw something like this to understand what your z-index is doing. Now I have another. Say it again.
Not sure. उनका गाड़ी है? तो है तो फिर वही है तो फिर वो
Okay, Hemant. Okay.
Okay.
So, what if I want to give you a question. What if I want now A in this order, S, A, and B? How do I do that?
Yes, A and B.
Yeah.
It takes -2 also, right? Like -2, -1, and 0.
Yep. So what I would do is make A, make B -1, -2.
Yeah.
So B moves down. So what I would do is here, right now I have A is -1, right? And so B is always gonna be on top, so I can make it -2. Now, as you can see, A is on the top of B, and then S is always the top. So here I would have to create another floor. Let's create another floor here called -2, and I would put B there, right? And now S, A, and B. So if you understand the fundamentals of this thing, you can actually control it, and that's the objective.
Yeah.
When I first started CSS, I had no idea how z-index works, and I'm gonna tell you, a lot of people who do CSS day-to-day basis, they have no clue how z-index works. So the way a lot of people do is, hey, my element is not coming. Let's say B is not showing up, right? What people do is like, I'm gonna make it to 200,000. Okay, is it showing up? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a bad idea. It works, but it's a bad idea.
I've seen few examples like they put 10.
Yeah, and I've done this,
bring
right?
it up.
If I put 10 doesn't work, I would put 50 doesn't work. I'll just put 5,000.
Yeah.
It's a human nature, right? So, but if you understand it, so never apply. So let's look at the rules. Z-index only works on a positioned elements, which means the positioned elements are. So let's look at the rule. The first rule is works on positioned elements, which means absolute fixed, relative, and I think there's another one called sticky.
Sticky, I think look at sticky.
Yeah, we haven't looked at the sticky yet, but yeah, okay. So it does not work on a static. If I change this to, let's say, I believe it won't work, okay? Let's just try that. So z index, let's say -3. See, it did not work.
Yeah.
Okay.
So same as this top left 10.
Yeah. So it always stays on the same floor, which is called static floor. Okay. So that's the first rule. The second rule is I should not have. Okay. So that's the first rule. The second rule is that it follows for the position elements. The last one for the positioned elements, last one shows on the top, right? So here, by default, if I don't provide any z index, then B is always going to be on top than A, right? Because B came later.
Yeah.
Right? The last one on the top, right?
Yeah.
For the position element. The third rule is, this is the second rule. The third rule is that if you change the, and then z index, first of all, z index has to be integer, right? Which means positive full numbers, right? Basically.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it gets ignored. Okay. Actually, I need to create a document on this because I could not find these rules anywhere in the. I had to create. I created these rules. I could not find a good document that actually shows this, right? Okay. And then the last rule is the higher z index also for position elements, by default,
yeah,
z index is 0.
Yeah.
Is 0, right? So it always have this floor, 0 floor. So that's a fourth rule. And then the last rule is basically higher z index means on the top, right? Which I'm not gonna write, but that's kind of given.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you follow these 4 rules, you'll figure out how to do it. Okay. Any questions? I think I'm gonna create that medium. I just recently I started doing the medium.
Yeah. I mean the last one I have read.
Yeah.
The one which you shared.
Yeah, I'm gonna create, and also I have if you want to know more about z index, I also have a YouTube video that I created a few months back. You can search on. I think it's like a few months back. You can search on it, and I'm not going in that in detail. I mean, so I'm kind of improving it, but I may not explain in the video as in detail as this, but you can look at it. It might have a different example. I think it was this z-index tutorial. Okay. And this is called stacking order. Yeah, the one thing I forgot is called stacking order.
Yeah, the stacking words.
Yeah. Stacking order is nothing but which one is stacked on the top and which one is at the bottom. So that like you would have order 1, 2, 3, right? But think of this as a floor. Whenever you create a z-index, it creates a floor on this, and you always have a static which is 0, right? And then on the top you will have a default for the positioned elements like a 0th floor, and then you will have all the floor for all the other z like specified z-index floors. Okay, so yeah. Okay, any questions? All right. Okay, so we have about 8 minutes left. Do you guys want to discuss any other topic? Because I don't have enough time to. Any topic or anything that you guys want to discuss?
Emil, can we discuss my Angular testing thing or like?
Yeah, actually I got that question on that. That it was not an interface. I mean, it was not in class. Like you said, it was an interface.
Sure. Can you show me your let me share your screen. Let me give you permission so you can share your screen. Do you have it on your computer? Sahil?
Yeah, I do have in my
Okay.
computer. Yeah.
Can you share it?
I mean, normally interfaces, we have to like use a keyword interface, right, for interfaces.
Yes, you have to. I'm not. I mean, I'm not that great at TypeScript, but I know that if you have a class. Okay, can you show me your code? Okay. So can you go from the top? What was your issue? Okay. All right. So where exactly you're having issue?